All right, Kara, I'm okay. Are we live now?
We're live, yes.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, March 18th, and this is the Southern Maryland delegation meeting. I'd like to welcome you all. Uh, I will indicate, unfortunately, that I have a voting session that is commencing right now in another meeting, so I will not be here the entire time. And Vice Chair Delegate Rachel Jones will take over. But I just want to greet you and to say thank you very much for those of you who will be providing really critical information regarding our housing situation. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Jones if she will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Senator Jackson, since you're here, would you mind leading us in prayer? Delegate Clark is running late and he will be unable to do this. Senator Jackson? Senator Jackson, you're muted.
Good morning, everybody. The
request is if you're willing or able to lead us in prayer. If not, I will do it. I have to get off in a few minutes.
So I'm actually juggling right now. So if somebody else could, I appreciate it.
I will do it. Let us pray. Come to a position of worshiping God. Heavenly Father, as we gather here today for this critical meeting on housing and how we can best serve our citizens, we ask that you will give us guidance, you will give us direction, and most of all, we thank you for all the blessings you've afforded us. In thy name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Delegate Jones, thank you very much. It's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I would like to introduce our from housing to begin the presentation. And I believe we'll go with Sandy Washington from Lifestyles.
Good morning. I don't know if I'm able to share my screen.
You should be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Let me know if you're having problems.
Okay. All right, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. I'm Sandy Washington. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Lifestyles of Maryland, and our main office is in Charles County. I also serve as the chair of the local homeless coalition for Charles, Calvert, and St. Mary's counties. I want to, let me see if I can get in here. Just a little bit about us, and for those that don't know about Lifestyles, some of our main focus on services that we provide are food, clothing, financial assistance, homeless outreach, shelter services, transportation. As you can see, we have some safe housing for domestic violence, and we do some advocacy and health and wellness. We were fortunate to be a part of the local emergency rental assistance programs, where between Calvert and Charles County, we provided over $2 million in rental assistance to families within the community. Some of the services currently available in Charles County, which does not only include I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. It's some of our street outreach and encampments, our shelter services, hypothermia services, transitional housing. We provide homeless certification, and I've talked about the domestic violence, transportation, and really looking at financial assistance for permanent housing, rapid rehousing, access to public health, and housing and employment resources, listing and services for the county. And I give this information to try to give you some background on where we're coming from as it relates to housing in Charles County. We are part of the coordinated entry process for Southern Maryland. And that includes making sure that people that need service are going through this coordinated access to allow us to make sure we're not, people aren't falling through the cracks. We're working with departments of social services, our housing authorities, and others to see what services are available and how we can prioritize folks that are in need. And that's a difficult thing when you're looking at making sure you're looking at this in an objective way and it's not subjective. And so we want to make sure we're going through the same process. We look at a stronger connection with our agencies and partnerships with county and community agencies. And that's really important to get services done. This hits us at home, and when you start looking at the range of housing options and where people are. I'm focusing on Charles County because that's where our primary office is, and many of our homeless services are in Charles County. Some of the pictures that we're showing are not in one particular area of the county. Scattered through our county are scenes like this. What you see in here is a makeshift outhouse that had been put together where people have been using that to live. So from encampments to places that are considered uninhabitable. These are some of the sites that we see in our county. According to HUD, if a place doesn't have electricity, it doesn't have running water, those things make it uninhabitable. And those people are really listed as being homeless as a result of their living situation. And so these are some of the housing units that are depicted in these pictures. This is a picture of our volunteers that deliver water to houses that don't have indoor plumbing. And so we take for granted we can turn on a tap and water comes out and we're fine. But when you look at the situation that people are living in, that they can't even access running water, that makes things very difficult for these families. We have provided, as you see in this one picture, this house looks reasonable, but they have no indoor plumbing. So we've worked to provide at this point an outhouse or portable pot that's really serviced every week. And we have a company that comes in and services them. During the time of the pandemic, when we were heavily in the pandemic and people were dealing with, making sure you wash your hands and do those types of things, these are places that had no running water and could not do that. And so we actually rented porta-johns and hand washing stations to place at some of these locations to allow these families to have access to that. What we feel that we need is a menu of housing options. Everything is not for everyone. There are people that are homeless, that are living in encampments, that choose to live in encampments. I know that's hard to believe, but that's their choice. What we're not talking about those folks, we're talking about the folks that don't want to have that as an option. So where are the options for us through this, from walk-in shelters to workforce housing? We have to have a menu of housing options that support the people that live in our community. And these are some of the challenges that we see. The lack of affordable stock or inventory, the bottlenecking of households in shelters. So when we have people that are in transitional housing or in shelters, we are mandated, or I kind of say we're pinged if we don't move people out of those shelters in a timely manner. So if we have 90 days to get people out of shelter and we can't move them anywhere because they don't have the income or the stock to move them. They're bottlenecked in that situation with nowhere to go. And so people that are providing these services have no options to move people further. So how do you get people from one point to the other if there's nothing there? It's hard to be able to say, we have nothing here, so we're going to move you somewhere where there is housing that's affordable. We're not looking to take people out of what could be their support network that could help strengthen them to some place that may have affordable housing, but has no support network for them. And no one wants to have people transported across county lines to be in affordable housing because they have it there. We need to have people be able to live and afford to live where they're planted. Excuse me. And we need to look at housing first guidelines as far as transitioning people, and that's the 90-day thing. And then people need more assistance. Any agency you talk to in the county will tell you they are not mandated to provide case management. And many of these folks need additional assistance to stay on track, to keep moving forward and have a better quality of life. And while rapid rehousing funds are wonderful, they do not solve the problem of housing availability. They pay for housing, but they don't create housing. This was just a snapshot, and I know you have someone from SMAR that's going to be able to talk, but this was just a snapshot we got from our local realtors that we presented on in February, that we got this and looked at the fair market value for each of these units, and considering what the income is for the people that we're serving, this certainly isn't something that's affordable. And we took 2 of the zip codes. We didn't go through the entire county. We took 2 zip codes and looked at what that would mean for families and who could afford to do that. Again, this is something from HUD showing, the largest shortfalls, and you see in Maryland, this minus 1017 for income and housing, and that was in 2021 in their out of reach documents. If we looked at affordability gaps, and this, I'm sorry that Mr. Nicholson couldn't be here and Jennifer Moreland, but this, when they presented to the Leadership Southern Maryland, these are some of the information that was provided. And if you can look at Charles County alone, you can see that, what the need was 2,600, and the available rental units was 2,200. Even at that point, there was seeing that gap existed. And so some of our housing recommendations, we're requesting additional housing vouchers, excuse me, designated for target groups, target populations, our veterans, our low income, our senior citizens, households transitioning from homelessness, but also we need to look at the formula that is there for housing vouchers for different areas. Obviously, if we have this many people in need of housing, this federal formula is not working to the benefit of the people that live in our communities. And then we're asking to reduce those barriers that allow that would allow housing authorities and local organizations that are boots to the ground to look at ways that we can accommodate the needs of the people, because there are so many barriers that exist. Every step you take, it's something that they cannot do or aren't able to do because of some other restriction. So we need to look at what those restrictions are and what barriers are there. And then we need to recruit housing developers to the community to support this low income. And I know that's always a case that happens, that everybody says, no, well, we don't, what is low income? What is affordable? And while we're still debating what that is. There are people that are going without housing. There are people that can't afford to have a roof over their heads. And so we need to come into some agreement of what this is, what is workforce housing, what allows us to move forward, looking at additional housing tax credits. How does this all work for our community? And then we need to focus on those moderately priced dwelling units, increasing the diversity in housing. That's my housing menu, and updating those zoning codes to allow accessory dwelling units. And then looking for support efforts to use ARPA funding right now to create more affordable housing units. I'm going to lose my voice already. Excuse me. These are potential options. Like, tiny homes are not the answer for everything, and they are not what we're saying is what's needed. But if we start looking at a menu of housing, then tiny homes can offer some ways of doing this. One unique thing about this is tiny homes are not considered permanent housing. And because they're not, you can't use HUD vouchers with tiny homes. Additionally, they are one aspect that could help when you're talking about people moving from places that don't have indoor plumbing, or they really need to be torn down. These homes can be modified to accommodate those folks. But this is just an example of something to do, something that we're looking at for tiny homes. And finally, I just want to say adequate housing is a basic right. I don't know how to say it any plainer to say that, everybody should have the right to have shelter. And I don't mean just a tent over their heads or anything. Everybody needs housing that can accommodate their needs and have a roof over their heads. And we can only do that with the private citizens, the individuals, the community, and the government. That's how we make it happen. So I could certainly answer any questions. I hope this hits a little bit of what we intended to do today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Washington. It's very good to see you. I do want to pause for just a moment if we could. I had some technological challenges earlier and couldn't see my full agenda, but I knew that Sandy was on it today. So I do need to go back for just a moment. If we could just approve the February 4th, February 18th, and March 4th minutes, then we can come back to the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes, please?
Yeah, I move the minutes.
Is there a second? Thank you. Minutes are approved. I think we'll take your two questions and then we'll move back into the agenda in the original order. So we'll go from the Community Development Network of Maryland after your two questions. Senator Jackson.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Washington. Thank you for the presentation. I look forward to finding out more about your organization. I'm the newest member of the Charles County delegation. And look forward to coming down to meet you and after the session. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you so much, Delegate Jaskin.
Yeah.
Senator Ellis.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Jones. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. Washington. I just want to thank you for your leadership in this space over many, many years. And so I'm just kind of curious, as far as the homeless count, when was the last homeless count that was done, and what numbers do you have?
So I want to clarify that. Our last, the point in time homeless count is, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Senator, yes, the point in time is done the third Wednesday in January. So we did the homeless count in January of this year. The problem with that count, and let me just say the numbers from this January, we have not received yet, and we won't have those until April. They do that because we want to make sure there's no duplication in our numbers. But when we look at our counts, please know that the point in time is only the snapshot of homeless for that one night in January. And it only counts according to HUD's guidelines. So that means that if someone paid for themselves in a hotel, they're not counted. If someone was sleeping on a sofa, as we call couch surfing, they're not counted. So an example is that if we said that we showed that we had 154 homeless individuals in Charles County through point in time, that says that. But at the same time, the public school had 670 homeless children in Charles County public schools. So when you start talking about what the homeless count is, we have to be clear on how you're identifying homeless. And the public school looks at McKinney-Vento as identifying the homeless count. So they're counting the couch surfing, they're counting their students that are considered homeless through McKinney-Vento.
So thank you for that. So that number you gave from the school system, is that their current number for this school year?
Their current number as of March 1st was over 700.
Over 700. Yeah, and so thank you for that. And could I just say to everyone, our floor session's been moved up till 10 o'clock today. So, and I have a couple of meetings right before that. So I have to leave this meeting, but not because this is not an interest of mine. This topic, I serve on along with Delegate Patterson, the Joint Committee on Homelessness, and in our 4th year. So I'm very passionate about this issue and to find solutions. So thank you, and my apologies of leaving early.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. And we'll take another question from Delegate Proctor.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. They're not words to express gratitude for all you do. I just have a comment. I look at the news and I see Poland and various countries putting up structures, if you will, tents or whatever, to house the refugees. And I'm wondering, is there anything we can learn from the way they're handling this? If there are any ideas, if you've had a chance to look at that at all.
Delegate Proctor, this is near and dear to me, so I don't know, I have some feedback. It's near and dear to me, so I can tell you that I'm not going to hold back. I think we need to come to, when we look at housing, and I'm not just saying for those that are homeless, when we look at housing, we need to look at it from a what can we do situation from rather than why we can't do something. And I think many times we look at it that, we have regulatory agencies, which we really need to have for the safety of all of us. But we have to come to the table looking at what we can possibly do to make things change. And I think when you talk about those other countries or even in other states, when they're putting in unique programs, they're coming to the table to say what we can do and not looking at what can happen. There are so many possibilities. Even when we talk about tiny homes, I get people that come to have approached me and said, you can't do that because the regulations again. We know that there are regulations and we want people to be safe, but let's not stop at the starting point. And so we need to be able to move forward with some of these initiatives. Try it as a pilot, do those things and see if it works. Take some of these houses in some of these communities and put holding tanks on them that we've looked into and researched to at least give them indoor plumbing. How can we go home every day and not consider what we're allowing people to live in and not try to better their lives? I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of that, Delegate Proctor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Proctor. Thank you very, very much, Ms. Washington. I know we've discussed All of the challenges and additional housing vouchers are something that, we understand are needed. I also want to highlight, I know it's already been said that even though Lifestyles of Southern Maryland provides, or is based on, I should say, in Charles County, you all service all 3 Southern Maryland counties, and you're preparing to open a Calvert location soon. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much for everything that you do. We're going to move on to Claudia Wilson-Randall, of the Community Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. Claudia, good to see you this morning.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much. And thank you. I really appreciate, everyone is rolling with it this morning, and I appreciate you all inviting me to speak today. My name is Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. And the Community Development Network of Maryland is a statewide advocacy organization that serves more than 200 organizations across the state, including our members like Lifestyles. And we focus on affordable housing development, housing counseling, and community-based nonprofits across the state of Maryland. Our mission is to promote, strengthen, and advocate for the community development sector throughout Maryland's urban, suburban, and rural communities. And I don't want to spend too much time talking today because I want you to have a chance to hear the other speakers. So I'm going to sort of cut things a little bit short, but I do want to talk about the fact that CDN was instrumental in the state and pushing the state to do the Maryland Housing Needs Assessment. And our advocacy in 2017 and 2018 led to the Maryland Housing Needs Assessment being done and completed in 2021. And that is a 400-page document by the National Center for Smart Growth and Enterprise Community Partners. And that really took an inventory of the state to see what the need for affordable housing was across the state. And we are lacking in 85,000 units, probably closer to 100,000 units across the state of affordable housing for the economics, for the jobs that we have and will have in 2030. So I really appreciate Sandy's going first and contextualizing that we still have third world conditions in the state of Maryland, and we need to address those conditions, and we need to really address the need for housing for people at the very lowest incomes. And that's critical from an economics point of view, because we need those jobs. And we continue to have jobs that pay less than $20 an hour in our economy. And those and throughout the last 24 months, we've been talking about those people as essential workers. They need safe, decent places to live. So I think it's really critical that in terms of my ask for the Southern Maryland delegation, that we push state and local governments towards spending on affordable housing production and rental housing assistance and vouchers and legislation that actually drives investment in housing throughout the state. With that, I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Melissa Bondi from the Enterprise Community Partners, because they are the co-authors of the Maryland Housing Needs Assessment. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. And I'm happy to also answer questions, outside going forward and talk with Delegate Patterson, Delegate Jones, and anyone else who has questions. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Melissa from, the State and Local Policy Director of Mid-Atlantic at Enterprise Community Partners. Glad to have you this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the great presentation that preceded mine. I am with Enterprise Community Partners. We were one of the lead authors, as Claudia mentioned, in the Housing Needs Assessment for Maryland. I do have slides, so I'm going to put my slide deck up. And let me just say that there are more slides than we have time. So I'm glad to make these slides available for folks who would like to reference them later, but don't worry too much about some of the details, because I think we just won't have enough time to get into quite that level of detail. But let's see. Okay. So let's advance. So the Maryland Housing Needs Assessment, as Claudia mentioned, was published last year. We thank the General Assembly for its commission. This really did start several years ago. It was slightly delayed over the pandemic, but as a practical matter, it relies on relatively recent data, and it really looks at all of the housing needs across the entire state of Maryland, from renter to homeownership, homelessness to workforce housing, and everything in between. As Claudia mentioned, it's several hundred pages long, but it includes a variety of resources that are available to the public, to elected officials, to your staff, that provide lots of data by census tract, by jurisdiction, as well as providing a policy toolbox of best practices that are not only for state, but also for local governments, municipalities, towns, counties, or regional cohorts that are looking at how to maybe problem solve together on the issue of housing affordability. It also includes a number of maps and interactive information that you can find and work with online, as well as, of course, the report itself. So it's really intended not to sit on a shelf. It's intended to be interactive. It's intended to be used to help policymakers, stakeholders, and community members to make good decisions about housing affordability that's based in facts, based in information and data. The guiding principles for the Housing Needs Assessment, as you may recall, are to promote equity in housing, to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to take advantage of existing and future housing programs and assets and resources, to ensure we have a balanced housing supply of choices, both in terms of rental and ownership, typology, location, and access to services. We also want to make sure, as Claudia alluded to, that we are supporting economic growth. One of the very best ways to ensure local investment from the public and private sector, creation of jobs and long-term assets, including tax base in any community, is to invest in housing. And then also to acknowledge that different parts of the Southern General Assembly District, as well as across Maryland, they have different needs, different levels of intensity, different heights, different building typologies, different income levels. So those are really the policy priorities for the Housing Needs Assessment. What you'll find in the report is an accurate analysis of housing needs, both in current conditions and as our projected 10 years in the future. And that's consistent with most state housing needs analysis, to take a 10-year look ahead as to what's needed now and what we project to be needed. It also provides explicit recommendations, both statewide as well as by region within the state. The HNA breaks the state up into regions, including one specifically for Southern Maryland. And then it also acknowledges that there may be different solutions at different income levels for those in the state, and tries to make sure to identify special needs, special populations, and then special recommendations based on income level. So our priority needs are houses for those of lower income. That is where we have the greatest delta between supply and demand, in that we have a lot more demand than we have supply. And we also do have a problem with our level of construction, the amount of new housing units we are producing to meet current and future population demand for affordable income categories. We also wanted to make sure that in our priority populations, we disaggregated those who are extremely low income households, folks that Ms. Washington would work with, permanent supportive housing, extremely low income residents, as well as seniors, persons with disabilities, persons experiencing homelessness, and then the working poor. And of course, a household or an individual could be in more than one of those categories at the same time. I mentioned that there were a number of different resources that are available that are interactive and online. This is just acknowledging and giving examples of what the toolkits are, toolbox of policy recommendations, and then the interactive maps for both renters and homeowners. So I'll just skip past that quickly. At the state level, for context, before we get into some Southern Maryland specifics, currently, we are expecting a change between 2020 and 2030 of about 8% more households coming into Maryland over the course of 10 years. In 2020, we have about 2.3 million households. And in 2030, we think that number will be about 2.5 million households. So if this was correct, we would have a lot of household capacity to build in order to accommodate those who are migrating into Maryland and those who wish to stay here who may be here already. We also note that of this population, 850,000 are seniors who have specific different kinds of housing needs. They are currently 14% of all Marylanders, and that number is increasing. So we are aging as a state. In addition, about 11% of all Marylanders are persons who live with a disability. Not all of those folks are seniors, of course, but we also have 630,000 folks who will have specialized accessibility needs as a result of their physical health. And we need to keep that in mind when we are thinking about what we are building or retrofitting. The other thing I want to bring to your attention, this is a somewhat complex chart, but if you can see the thin red circle in the top, it's really important. We cannot talk about housing affordability without acknowledging the role that income plays relative to the cost of living, both in the United States as a whole and of course in Maryland. And what we note is that over the last 20 years, looking backward to our current conditions, the median household income in Maryland only increased by 5%. That's cumulative, that's not per year. While the cost of median rent went up by 33%, almost 34, really a third, and home values increased by almost 50%. So if you were already in a house in 2000, you did really well. But if you're trying to find a place to live, your income is not keeping pace with rental costs, making it hard to save for a home. And if you can afford a home, you're finding that the cost is getting increasingly expensive over time to even break into the market, let alone to stay in it. So about this chart, there's more information, but that I think is really the A story. What we saw overall in demographic trends across the state are an increasingly diverse racial and ethnic population by 2030, slow growth in real incomes to the point I was just making. We have an aging population. We have increasing persons with disability relative to the full population. We have increasing cost burden. And for those who may not be familiar, cost burden is a term of art in housing. It is something that is defined by HUD. And it says that a person or a household is cost burdened when they are paying more than 30% of their income on their housing needs. If you choose to spend more, that's one thing. But if it's because you cannot actually find housing that's less expensive than that, you are cost burdened. We also have something called severe cost burden, which is when you are paying 50% or more of your income in rent or in your housing costs. And regrettably, that number is also going up in Maryland. We have more people paying more of their incomes in housing than before. We also, unfortunately, do have a racial gap in terms of the distribution of cost burden, with a disproportionate amount of cost burden facing African American and Latino households relative to their Caucasian, Asian, and other identified peers. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip past some of this, but I'll just acknowledge that we looked at land use. We looked at some of the land cost barriers to why can't we produce more housing quickly. We looked at the financing for housing, the way that you have to finance housing. We looked at the impact of the Great Recession. And we also looked at the relatively limited amount of for sale housing that is churning over, or new housing that is being produced and offered for sale in Maryland, making it hard for folks to move from a renter into home ownership tenure. So let's look real quickly at big picture. These are things that are true in Southern Maryland, but they are also true across the state. When we think about renters specifically, what we find is housing instability, that is renters not having choice and control over where they live on the basis of lack of supply for rents that they can afford, or lack of opportunity because they have to live in a specific area in order to commute safely to work, or because they have a child who needs to be in a particular school district for their needs, and so that limits where they can live, or they just don't have control over where they live, and a landlord could decide at any moment that they want to take a building condo or something like that, and so they just don't have a lot of choice. Limited supply we've talked about, and as Washington mentioned as well, we simply are not building enough housing. We're not building enough housing that is committed affordable to meet the needs of current and future Marylanders. We have concentrations of housing affordability in specific parts of jurisdictions rather than being more located in areas of high amenities, high quality schools, access to jobs, transportation, healthcare, recreation. We also have the risk of existing housing that's considered affordable being lost, either through land sale and change of what happens on that land when it's sold, or because units that are currently committed affordable will expire. They are not committed affordable in perpetuity, and they will expire, and then whatever happens with them and the tenants who live in those buildings may be decided by the private sector in a way that marginalizes them or displaces them. And then we also talked about that there are higher rents relative to incomes. Other issues that we are dealing with, demographic changes I acknowledged, land use I acknowledged, the cost of development has gone up tremendously, both in terms of inflation and absolute costs. So it costs more to build the same unit than it did 5 years ago, and it's projected to cost more 10 years from now than it does today. We also have issues of fair housing, where people who should be allowed and able to find housing are discriminated against, either on the basis of their income level or their sources of income, or their race, their ethnicity, their identity, and then also making sure that we're doing a better job citing housing that is affordable in places that already have other amenities so that folks can take full advantage of opportunities that are available to them. So I will skip past some of this information in order to get through the interest of time, but there's lots of really good stuff in here, especially about serving renters with specialized housing needs. But to look specifically at Southern Maryland, what we find is that this is a small but rapidly growing region. That's probably not a surprise to anyone on a call. We are also seeing relatively rapid pace of increase in cost for housing, both on the rental side and on the ownership side. We also find that compared to the rest of the state, Southern Maryland is dealing with higher than average homeowner market issues, delinquencies and payments, foreclosures, concerns. This was pre-pandemic, but also still with us today, housing instability, even for those who are homeowners. So our housing market in Southern Maryland was captured about 171,000 total households, comprising about 360,000 total people, and 65 total census tracts, which was the basis of a lot of the information that is in the details here. So that's here on the home ownership side, looking at Southern Maryland, we noticed that we see higher needs for home ownership in the more rural parts of specific areas of this jurisdiction, but we still have high poverty and therefore high cost burden, the amount people are paying in order to have a home or a roof over their head, the delinquencies and foreclosures, and also a high level of elderly and disabled populations relative to the overall population. So thinking about their specific needs. In terms of actions, we have recommendations on how to reduce barriers to access home ownership, how to increase demand for single family homes, how to address the high cost of construction for affordable home ownership, also how to create local home ownership programs in each of the jurisdictions, how to establish employee assisted housing programs working with the private sector in order to attract and retain talented workforce, and then also looking at expanding the Maryland Mortgage Program financing beyond their priority funding areas in order to serve more folks from Southern Maryland. On the renter side, we see high need for more rental housing and more affordable rental housing in each of the jurisdictions. We also have increases in rents without increases in construction. So we're not building enough supply to meet demand, and that's just putting more pressure on existing residents who do not want to leave their units, even if they hypothetically could afford even more, because there's nowhere else for them to go. We have concentrations of where housing is located for those of low income on the basis of minority identity, race, ethnicity, or other identity issues.
Excuse me, Ms. Bondi, this is Delegate Patterson's office. I apologize, but the members only have 15 minutes left until they need to be on the floor.
Okay.
Can these materials be sent along and we can send them?
Yes, I would be glad to do that.
Wonderful. I appreciate that.
Yep, I can't see the clock, so I appreciate you letting me know. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, and if everyone could send their slides, that would be very helpful. So we're going to move now to Dennis Nicholson is not with us, it looks like. So we're going to move now to Teresa Coons, the Vice President of Government Affairs, Southern Maryland Association of Realtors. Thank you for being here this morning, Teresa. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Good morning, and nice to see you as well, Ms. Vice Chairman. So I think what you're hearing from across these panelists, that the multi-pronged approach we need to take. And I think that's a very important thing to keep saying. It is not just going to be legislation or zoning laws, but we have to work together across our different groups. We're advocating for housing for all and working with our local, our state, and our federal representatives. I wanted to take a quick look at some of the reports that you've already seen. I'm just going to tell you the top data I see in these. NAR released, and that's the National Association of Realtors, a housing report for 2022. Right now, homeownership across the nation is 64%. Now, the national average, and I think this is an important thing to note, for Black homeownership is only 43%. And it's something that SMART's been working on for the last 3 years out of St. Mary's County. We feel there is an issue with the FHA limits. There is no low down payment program in St. Mary's, and that has a huge effect on Great Mills and Lexington Park areas specifically for Black homeownership. And there is a good note in the national average that Maryland is second in the country right now for Black homeownership at 52% in the nation. And I think that's really important to note because we are doing good things and we are seeing good numbers, but we do have a long way to go. Another issue, and Sandy touched on it, and we share the same brain. I was on mute and hiding my face because Sandy, I was cheering you on when you did your presentation. We have to increase the vouchers. There's no way around it, and we need to work with our federal representatives to get that done. On the FHA limit, I've been working with both senators and the majority leader. I met with the Assistant Secretary of HUD, so I think we have some connections there, and if we maybe work together as a group along with this delegation, we may be able to assist those plans together in place. We also have a bill in place right now in front of the House and the Senate called accessory dwelling units, and that is our tiny homes. But it's tiny homes that you can use vouchers for. And really it's a unit in your own property for single family owners to use it on their properties. Calvert's had it in place for about 2 decades, and Delegate Clark brought that up in our presentation and had some really good feedback. I think it's something that we should all be looking at doing and working together. Now, going off the report that Melissa was just talking about, I'm gonna pull 2 numbers that struck me that we should all be aware of as delegates and senators as well as advocates. We have an 84,000 unit in Maryland undersupply of housing. And when you have an undersupply, you have an inventory issue and supply and demand and costs. These costs are increasing due to the undersupply. And I've heard several of you say it. Again, it has to be a multifaceted approach about how we affect that, whether it's ADUs, tiny homes, various units, and I believe in the tax credits. We put 3 bills in the Charles County delegation and county commissioners in August. One was for workforce housing development. There's extra revenues every year. It needs to be put toward a public-private partnership. We have to house our police officers, our hospital workers, our teachers. And when we do that, the folks that Sandy's working with has an opportunity to get into lower income housing because those folks are moving up to the next level. And we really see a great way of working together. The other important note I think we need to take from the housing report from DCHD, half of all our new households in 2030 are going to be low income, and we have nothing in place for these people. So that is a huge deal. We have to figure out how to get that low income housing prepared and ready by 2030. We are 8 years away. I'm going to also take out some numbers for you guys to know what the inventory looks like today. As Melissa said, we have 171,000 households in Southern Maryland. I'd be remiss to say we have 2,000 realtors who are working in Southern Maryland, specifically 30,000 across the state. In the 171,000 households, we have 360,000 residents in Southern Maryland. Currently today in Calvert County, there's 72 homes for sale. Charles has 96 units. St. Mary's County has 89. That's a total of 257 units for sale in all of Southern Maryland for 358,000 people and outside the region. In rentals, we have 17 in Calvert, 30 in Charles, and 33 in St. Mary's. That's 80 total. What does that mean? I'm not a big math person, but I remember algebra. And when I did the algebra, that means in Southern Maryland, we have 0.19% of all housing is available. right now, 0.19%. That is a very low number. It is not a healthy market number. We hope with things like ADUs being put in place, especially with the senior wait list, we know we have over in Calvert County of over 2,000. We'll either help people stay in their homes and add an ADU, or they can move up to the next type of house and they require allowing others to move in behind them. It is a cycle. And it's something we do need to work together as a group, both advocates as well as elected officials. And we're here to help and support those efforts. And I'll leave you there at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. You made a really, really great point. It is going to require all of us working together, all the stakeholders here, all of the senators and delegates, and you mentioned the federal delegation, because there are some ways that we could be getting help in this area, like you mentioned with the FHA loans. And so we're happy to, partner with you and all the stakeholders here to ensure that we do that. Our bell has rung. Mr. Hance, are you able to give us about 1 minute? And then we'll have to depart. I do apologize. We thought we were going to have until 11 today for voting on the floor.
Yes, well, welcome to the delegation this morning. I just want to share a thought around cooperative housing and how it can really address many of the needs that have been identified by all the presenters in terms of bringing additional inventory into the housing market. As you all may not know, cooperative housing is congregate shared housing. And it's a model that really has been used very effectively in places like DC, Oakland, California, Massachusetts, where they have passed legislation to give tenants the first right of refusal of purchasing their dwelling units when apartment buildings do come on the market for resale. I think that cooperative housing can be the next wave of addressing the issue of supply and demand in terms of the housing market. And so I just wanted to share the work that we're doing to promote cooperative housing in Southern Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanson. Obviously, this is a conversation that needs to be continued. We thank you all for joining us this morning. And Kara,
Yes.
Delegate Patterson's Chief of Staff, if you would reach out to the stakeholders, I think, and well, I'll certainly speak to Madam Chair, Delegate Patterson about this, but because this is a conversation that we need to continue, obviously we've not had enough time today to brainstorm and to collaborate on this, but we certainly want to continue the conversation. So I will speak to the chair about setting up a follow-up conversation so that we can all have another meeting to get more in depth on this issue and see how we can all play a role in helping to make some progress. We need more units, more vouchers, FHA loans that are more affordable. We've heard all of your concerns this morning and we want to work with you. So thank you very much. And at this time, I don't believe there's any new business, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn so we can get to the floor. And everyone else may have gone to the floor, right? Delegate.
Thank you so much, Delegate Jones. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yes.
And we'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care now.
You're welcome. Good to see you all.
Kara, thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
Take care now.
Delegate
Bye-bye.
Jones, if you need to step off, I'll wait for somebody.
Okay, thank you.
Guess not.